Why is it taking so long for so many in the White House press corps to hold this administration accountable? And that question goes for other journalists on left-leaning networks as well. Earlier today, CNN's Jake Tapper slammed President Biden as he was utterly incredulous at one of the president's answers to George Stephanopoulos last Friday.
I feel as long as I gave it my all and I did the goodest job as I know I can do, that's what this is about.
As long as he gave it his all and did the goodest job he could do, that's what it's all about, is it? The president has said that Donald Trump, his opponent, poses an existential threat to democracy in the United States. Is his giving it his all and doing the goodest job he can do enough?
Let's be clear about something. Jake Tapper is as inside Washington as it gets. Is he trying to say he's only just now getting wise to the fact that there are serious questions surrounding President Biden's mental acuity? Where has he been? And here's the thing. Prior to the June 27th debate, the left-leaning media and Democratic lawmakers were totally content to be represented atop the ticket this fall by President Biden. But what changed with the debate was the sudden realization that Donald Trump could absolutely win the election. That possibility hadn't fully dawned on them until 11 days ago, which suggests that the brand new Biden critics on the left don't really have a problem with the president's ability to govern. They mostly are concerned about his ability to win. And that is very concerning. The Jake Tappers, the Joe Scarboroughs, they were completely fine with Joe Biden as long as he was in a position to beat Donald Trump. But now that the secret seems to be out about his cognitive ability and he might not win the election, it's a national crisis. And I'll tell you what, that feels totally disingenuous. Well, to talk about this, I'm joined by Steve Krakauer. He's the author of Uncovered: How the Media Got Cozy with Power, Abandoned Its Principles, and Lost the People. He's also a NewsNation media contributor. Steve, thanks so much for coming on to talk about this. So I'm going to pose the question to you. Why now? Why the 180 from Democratic lawmakers and the left-leaning media?
I think you start there with a cynical but I think very accurate interpretation of the fact that when you watch that debate, a lot of people, whether you're partisans or whether you're part of the media, and a lot of times those go hand in hand, they realize that Joe Biden was not going to beat Donald Trump. And so it was a purely political calculation. Okay, we need to get someone else swapped out there. If you really want to be cynical, you would say the debate, which was supposed to be in September, was moved to June so that this possibility could really happen. You have the time now to make that switch. So I absolutely think that that's one of the elements here. I also think that there's two other ones I would point out. One is there used to be a real social penalty that came to covering the Joe Biden administration in a way that was critical of the White House, of Biden. And these were people in the Washington, D.C. establishment media that they ran in the same circles as the Biden administration, a lot of like political lifers there. So you would be essentially penalized, you know, if you were from socially, intellectually, if you would go after them in a way that was critical that you might during the Trump years. That has completely gone away now. No, now we're seeing the pieces. Now all the great reporting is starting to come out. And then I would say, you played that Ed O'Keefe clip, right?
Yeah.
He was miffed. I've never seen Ed O'Keefe so mad. I do think that there is some actual real indignation from the press that does feel lied to by this administration. They should have done a better job at it, but they were also lied to by this administration. Now they're really mad about it.
But you know the pearl clutching about what happened, what was it, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, the end of June, with all the fake, cheap fakes videos about president. There was such a defense.
Right.
There was such a defense. And look, we on the program said, you know, we'll call out which ones are real, which ones are fake. Okay. But the idea that you couldn't even talk about it, the idea that, like, even if you raise the specter that there's a problem with President Biden's cognitive abilities, you're shunned. I mean, doesn't there have to be an apology at some point?
There should be, absolutely. And you know, one of the most ridiculous narratives that I've seen from some of the media defenders who are saying, look, this was being covered, are the people that say, for 2 years we've been talking about how Joe Biden is old. Well, this is not about Joe Biden's age. This is not about him being literally old. It is about the potential for cognitive decline and mental fitness. You see about the potential for this Parkinson's expert. Why is he at the White House this many times? That's now being reported at the New York Times, and it's not being discussed from the briefing room. So yes, I think that this idea about the cheap fakes was meant to distract from the reality of the situation, and whether it was consciously that the press was going along with it from a political reason, or whether they were doing it themselves, it was wrong.
It would have been very different if they had this conversation after a bad press conference he had, or after a bad speech he had, but after a debate with Donald Trump having this, it looks very clear what it is. Yeah. Steve Krakauer, thanks so much for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thank you for watching.
Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your cable provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.